The Labour Party finds itself at a crossroads. After years spent in opposition under Jeremy Corbyn, Labour hoped to revive its fortunes under the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer. Yet just 2 years into his tenure, Starmer is facing mounting criticism and declining trust. Once seen as a unifying figure who could steer Labour back to electability, Starmer is now portrayed in a far less flattering light. His leadership has been characterised as weak, indecisive, and out of touch with the public. As one commentator put it, the grandeur he exhibited during his early days has faded fast. Several factors have fueled the growing dissatisfaction with Starmer's leadership. His stance on core issues like immigration and the economy are viewed by many as opaque and constantly shifting, failing to offer a coherent vision. On immigration, his decision to scrap previous plans for deportations to Rwanda undermined faith in his ability to grapple with the issue. Additionally, Starmer has failed to connect with the British public in an authentic, relatable way. His predominantly legalistic leadership style often comes across as reserved and overly risk-averse. This had led to a perception that Starmer lacks the charisma and popular appeal of predecessors like Tony Blair. Within Labour's own ranks, there are rumblings of discontent. Criticism mounts over Starmer's centralised leadership approach, which some argue stifles dissenting voices. Others point to his failure to unite the party's feuding factions into a harmonious coalition. These internal tensions came to a head after Labour's poor showing in recent local elections. For many, it was further proof that Starmer lacks the vision and political savvy to reverse the party's electoral misfortunes. Calls for the leader to resign have grown louder, casting uncertainty over his future. As doubts grow about his effectiveness, Starmer faces a stark choice. He must confront the sinking public and party confidence in his leadership, or risk being swept aside. With possible leadership contenders waiting in the wings, Starmer faces intense pressure to chart a bold new course. Unless he can rediscover his early momentum, his tenure may be cut short. For Labour's loyal supporters, the hope ignited by Starmer's arrival has soured into disenchantment. The coming months will determine whether he can regain the trust and confidence that propelled him into power. If not, both Starmer and Labour may find themselves sliding back into the political wilderness. An effective political leader must articulate a clear vision and policy agenda that resonates with voters. On this crucial test, Keir Starmer is falling short. His policy positions on issues like immigration, democratic reform, and the economy have been vague, shifting, and devoid of substance. Starmer's biggest policy reversal came on immigration. He initially supported more moderate positions aimed at balancing different factions, but he abandoned the controversial Rwanda deportation scheme on his first day in office, angering those who sought stronger border controls. Scrapping this policy led many to see Starmer as weak on a hot-button issue. Critics also assail Starmer for muddled messages and fluid stances on Brexit. His efforts to softly balance the interests of Brexiteers and Remainers succeeded only in confusing voters unsure of his convictions. On democratic reform within Labour, he faces accusations of stifling debate and centralising power, alienating left-leaning party members. Perhaps the biggest policy liability for Starmer is the economy. With households facing a cost of living crisis, Labour supporters demand solutions from their leader. But Starmer has failed to articulate a coherent economic recovery plan or bold initiatives to remedy inequality and job insecurity. His thin policies expose an absence of vision some find alarming. Immigration, democracy, and the economy represent three vital policy spheres. Starmer's missteps and reversals on these key fronts reveal a leader without a compass. The public sees his hesitancy and second-guessing, not the assured direction of an alternative prime minister. To regain the trust of voters, Starmer must remedy these policy shortcomings. He needs clear plans on immigration that balance compassion and sovereignty. Democratic reforms must empower party members rather than ignore them. Most of all, he must paint a robust economic alternative one, with appeal across Labour's diverse coalition. Only by embracing principled and creative left-leaning policies can Starmer rally the public to his side. Without this policy renewal, voters may continue to see him as a leader adrift without a bold vision for Britain's future. Politics is about more than policies. To succeed, leaders must forge an emotional connection with the public. This human element has been lacking in Keir Starmer's leadership so far. Starmer's predominantly legal background often makes him come across as clinically reserved and excessively cautious. His personality and speaking style lack the passion and accessibility that allowed predecessors like Tony Blair to inspire supporters. As one observer noted, Starmer speaks like a lawyer, not a leader. This inability to stir hearts as well as minds has thwarted Starmer's efforts to mobilize grassroots enthusiasm. Labour supporters accustomed to impassioned rhetoric from figures like Jeremy Corbyn feel deflated by Starmer's tepid oratory. Starmer's struggle to connect extends beyond speaking style. He has failed to craft a compelling personal narrative that allows voters to relate to him. Unlike Boris Johnson's well-defined public persona, Starmer seems wooden and indistinct in the public imagination. That void of charisma and approachability has contributed to Starmer's falling approval ratings, now lagging far behind the Prime Minister's. Without a deeper public connection, Starmer will find it difficult to convince voters he offers a fresh vision for Britain's future. To overcome this liability, Starmer must embrace a bolder, more from the heart style. He needs public venues that allow him to display more spontaneity and charisma. Labour's hopes of returning to power depend on Starmer transitioning from remote politician to inspiring leader who can stir crowds with his passion. If he cannot discover his inner orator, Starmer risks becoming a forgotten man in British politics. The most vital political currency is authenticity. Until Starmer forges a human bond with the electorate, his ambitions will remain unfulfilled. Labour must have a leader who can touch people's hearts, not just appeal to their minds. The grumblings of dissatisfaction within Labour have now erupted into open dissent. Keir Starmer faces growing calls from within his own party to resign over his faltering leadership. The discontent stems from Labour's lacklustre results in recent local elections under Starmer's leadership. For some members, it reflects his inability to unite Labour's factious elements into an effective political force. Others point to policies like reversing the Rwanda deportation scheme as emblematic of Starmer's weakness. His sagging public support has also set off alarm bells among Labour MPs, who fear the party is unelectable under his guiding hand. They see a leader who lacks the vision and fortitude to take on the Conservatives at the ballot box. The chorus demanding Starmer's resignation has grown louder since the elections. Figures on Labour's left-wing cite his abandonment of Corbyn-era policies. Moderates argue a bolder figure is needed to woo back working-class voters. This two-pronged internal assault has left Starmer isolated. While Starmer clings to power for now, his diminished standing leaves him vulnerable. A formal leadership challenge could arise if enough Labour MPs call for one. Shadowy figures like Andy Burnham are already being touted as replacement leaders who could revive the party's fortunes. Starmer must quickly address this internal disarray. He needs to listen to grievances from across Labour's spectrum and re-energise its base. If dissent continues to fester, his leadership may collapse under its own weight. Labour cannot afford to have its internal dysfunction distract from the task of challenging the government. The coming months will determine whether Starmer can retain his post. To do so, he must unite Labour's factions and articulate a compelling policy vision. If not, his turbulent tenure may come to an abrupt end. Labour's return to government hangs in the balance. After a troubling start, Keir Starmer faces a dilemma how to regain his footing as Labour leader and restore the party's electoral hopes. The path forward will not be easy, but is not impossible if he takes bold corrective action. The first necessity is to unify Labour's internal factions. Starmer must channel the energy of left-wing voices rather than suppress them. Compromise and inclusion are essential to presenting a coherent front to voters. He must also move beyond cautious incrementalism and embrace an inspiring policy vision focused on improving livelihoods. As one commentator noted, Starmer needs the courage of his convictions. Reclaiming Labour's transformative spirit can re-energise its base. Equally important is nurturing his public persona. Starmer must display passion and greater spontaneity. He should highlight his personal story more and interact directly with voters. This is vital to seeming genuine and relatable. Some factors work in Starmer's favour, chiefly the government's recent troubles. But to fully capitalise, he must also excel as a communicator and unifying force. This is achievable if Starmer shows flexibility and imagination. Despite his troubles, the opportunity for renewal remains. The coming party conference will be a defining moment. Starmer must project boldness, not timidity. He can still resuscitate his leadership and Labour's chances. But the clock is ticking. Starmer cannot afford more aimlessness and indecision. If the current malaise persists, Labour faces irrelevance. The ingredients for success are there if Starmer can stir them into an appealing recipe. With vision and tenacity, he can still cook up a victory. Labour's fate rests on whether its leader can rediscover his own best ingredients.